podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to AI Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Fucking stellar, Dave. How are you?
Better than you by the sounds of things. The boiler in my house works perfectly fine. You are our man on the ground in Germany. So what has been the mood over the last few days since the Germans were eliminated by your beloved España?
Yeah, a very good question. I'm actually looking forward to answering that exact question, and I plan to do so in more depth on semi-final one night, because basically this is going to be the semi-final in Munich. So I'm going to go to somewhere to watch it. I'm not at that game, so I'm going to go to somewhere else to watch it, where fans would have been if it was Germany still in, because that's the game that they would have gone. So it'd be really interesting to see if like a large number of them are still watching, in fact. At the minute, it still seems fine. Like in the football cities, it still seems like lots of people walking around wearing the tops and all the rest of it. But when it comes time to that game you should have been playing in and that you probably thought you were going to be playing in, it will be quite interesting and eye-opening, I think, to see the reaction of the locals, of the people who have been like really fiercely back in the quite a lot of fan parks, even on non-Germany match days, have been pretty full, pretty, loud and lively and all the rest of it. So it will be quite interesting to see if that's still the case in a game Germany would have been in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a good point. Like, it'll be easier to tell what the mood is once the game that they should have been in, or, well, they'll feel they should have been in, comes around. Today's podcast, as we have no game on Monday, is a little bit of fun. We are going to pick our, and the key word there is our, all-time 11s for all four semi-finalists. So for Spain, for France, for England, and for the Netherlands. These are not set in stone. These are not the be-all and the end-all. So if you disagree, just turn around and argue with the wall. Don't send us nonsense. These are just our opinions. You are free to have your own. And if you have one, you have your own all-time Spain, France, England or Netherlands 11, please do feel free to send those over on social media. Will we start with the first semi-final then, Karl? Is that just easier?
Yeah, we'll go for Spain, because why not? And then
okay. I would imagine these teams will be heavily influenced by arguably the greatest international team of all time, 2008-2012 Spain. So all three of us are going to do this. We've got Guy with us as well. So do we want to just go goalkeeper, defence, midfield, attack, and we'll just go round like that?
Yeah, I think so. That's fine. I think obviously depending on how we all have them in our minds, it could be people that we've seen only, for example, or it might be teams that you've watched closely or been able to see footage of previously, or maybe sometimes players that you just know of and the reputation, the way that they're spoken about in the general football world as well. I think all of those are valid.
Yeah, so what I've done for my four is I haven't picked anybody who didn't play heavily after 1970. So I have nobody from the 60s, the 50s, so there's no Stanley Matthews, no Tom Finney. I don't have Bobby Moore. I have teams that are basically 1970 and onwards. Because I just don't feel comfortable comparing modern players to players from, pre-1970 that I haven't seen nearly enough of to give any kind of informed opinion on.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I've gone for basically my watching football lifetime one, so sort of mid-80s onwards.
See, that's fair.
Yeah.
And then Guy will be his football watching life. So mid-2010s onwards. Because he's
Euro 2020. Yeah.
Euro 2020 and onwards.
It's a good set of lads.
Right, let's start with Spain then. I have a feeling we'll all have the same goalkeeper. I've got Iker Casillas in goal.
I mean, if you're going to say Victor Valdez, I was going to go straight back off the pod again.
I figured that you might actually walk home to fix the boiler by yourself, such would be the rage.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Iker, isn't it? I must say, I was a big fan of Andoni Zubizarreta. Really, really very, very strong national team goalkeeper at the time, but also I think you have to factor in the fact that probably that wasn't a great era for Spain, and therefore maybe his level overall, and certainly what he achieved, was lower than what came afterwards.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, Spain obviously had 3 exceptional goalkeepers, basically one after another, and even overlapping each other. And no, I'm still not talking about Victor Valdez, but Casillas, Reina, and Santi Cañizares were all like elite, absolutely elite. But yeah, I think Casillas as the long-term one, the standout captain, obviously, yeah, has to be him.
And Guy, who's your goalkeeper?
Yeah, Casillas, he was like this mythical being whilst I was growing up, because you joked, which probably 2002 World Cup, probably when I started watching, but like week to week, like I can actually remember games, it's probably more 2004, so it was him and Buffon who were the mythical keepers whilst I was growing up, so yeah, he's definitely in this one.
Right, into the back four. I actually don't have a defender from that golden team, so I think my defence is going to be very different to what you guys have. I've got Dani Carvajal at right back. I did consider Sergio Ramos because he was a better right back than centre back. But I just think when you look at what Dani Carvajal has done in his career, and he's done it all understated, no limelight, no bullshit, and he still continues to perform at an exceptionally high level to this day. He's my right back. I've got two of my favourite centre-backs. I've got Manolo Sanchis and Fernando Hierro. And I've got Camacho at right back, Jose Antonio Camacho, who I think is the greatest Spanish left-back of all time. So Carvajal, Sanchis, Hierro and Camacho for me.
I nearly have the same centre-backs as you. I very nearly put Sanchez in for mine. In the end, I went with one who I liked a little bit more. I really liked Ivan Helguera, but I couldn't put him in just on a quality level in the end.
Yeah.
Just a little bit lower. But I've got Hierro and Abelardo. I loved him. Not the biggest, obviously, and a lot of right back, a lot of centre back, but I just think he was just a phenomenal defender. So I couldn't omit him. I have got one of that team, though. I've got Carlos Puyol, who was obviously in it at the beginning. So I've got him at right back. If you prefer, you can have him at centre back and Abelardo at right back instead. But either way around, those two. And left back, I've been backwards and forwards. I was going to pick another one of that sort of Barcelona era with Abelardo and have Sergi Barjuan, who was very, very good back. But in the end, I've gone for slightly more modern Jordi Alba, just because I think in terms of Spain's history over the last sort of 20 years or so, Alba was basically the first one who completely altered the dynamic. He was the first one who was like the really, really template of attacking fullback for them. Very, very good on the ball. Brilliant outlet. Obviously much more attack-minded than defensively, but he's not a bad defender just purely because of his aggression, his recovery pace, and the fact he's a massive shithouse. So I think overall, I'd probably go for Alba on overall impact on Spain than Barjuan.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think Jordi's just a little bit unfortunate that he's now a couple of years older, because he was obviously 19 when they won the first Euros. He was 21 when they won the World Cup, and he wasn't seen as ready at that point to step up. He was obviously, I think he was in Valencia's B team when they won he might have been on loan when they won the first Euros, and then the World Cup, he just broken into the Valencia team. And left back was sort of the problem position in the Euros and the World Cup. It was the one position you'd look at and say, oh, well, he's not the same quality as the rest. You know, you'd look at that team with, what was his name? Ramos playing right back, Marchena and Puyol at centre back, and then Capdevila, a good player, but not of the same quality as the rest. And then you look at the midfield and they're all-time greats and the attacker greats. But Capdevila just wasn't of that same calibre. And if Alba had been a couple of years older, he absolutely would have been the starter. No issue with any of those. I absolutely love a couple of those picks. Puyol was the one that I had a tough time leaving out. So I did love him, but I had to go Manolo. Guy, what have you got for us?
Yeah, mine's more vibes. Juan Fran at right back, because I like that Atletico Madrid team.
Love it.
Puyol PK, because I couldn't think of another centre-back and I don't like Ramos. And, of course, Moreno at left back.
I knew he was picking Albi Moreno.
Well, I'm ashamed he didn't.
Yeah. I think it's a solid pick, Karl. What do you think?
He's still in the fan club. Yeah, I mean, he's never going to change, is he? Let's be honest.
He's a free agent now. Bring him home.
Bring him home. Bring him home. Rob him out. Bring back Albi. He was robbed of his spot in the first place. Midfield. I've just gone for what I think is the most perfect midfield I've seen at international level. It's Busquets and Alonso as a double pivot with Xavi and Iniesta playing just in front of them. That box midfield under Del Bosque was just disgustingly good. I don't think they ever gave the ball away. I think if we go and look for the ball that they were playing with, they probably still have it. They probably just send it to each other in a box and it never gets away from them. It is just incredible. 4 undeniably world-class players, 4 the best midfielders to ever live. And the fact that they all played together is silly. So, yeah, Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, Alonso.
I think my only surprise there is you didn't pick Busquets 3 times. That was.
I did wonder, could I fit him in a second time? But no.
So I've got 3 of the 4, just because I wanted an additional name in attack. So I've got the typical Spain 4-3-3 tilting to 4-4-2, with Iniesta as my left-sided and third central player. So I've got Busquets, Xavi, and Iniesta.
What about you, Mr. Drinkle?
We're back with vibes.
You can't have Albi Moreno again.
That's not up to you. I've got Busquets because he is just the best player I've seen in that position in my lifetime. I've got Xabi Alonso because, well, look at him. And one of my favourite non-Liverpool players growing up was Cesc Fabregas. I know he kind of is the picture of when Arsenal kind of changed to a softer side, but I loved watching him whilst I was growing up. So I've got him in there. Yeah,
Cesc is a great player. There's no way to argue against Cesc.
Yeah. Cesc's like in top 10 capped all time for Spain. Like,
yeah, that's the thing.
He was. He's not sometimes mentioned in like Xavi and Xabi Alonso sort of thing, but I don't really know why. He is excellent.
Right, in attack then. So I've got 2 attackers. You've both got 3. I'm going for a player that was one of my all-time favourites, Raul, and I'm playing him off the best goal scorer I've seen, Spanish goal scorer, which is Emilio Butragueño, the Vulture, who was just silly in front of goal. Just an absolutely incredible finisher. So I've gone those 2. I've got Raul and Butragueño up front.
Yeah, very, very fair. So I've got Silva as my 4th midfielder, or right-sided forward, whichever you want. Obviously then Iniesta from the left, who is my favourite Spanish player of all time, I think. My forwards, I've also got Raul, impossible to leave out. It was quite difficult for most of the nation to see him left out in 2008, but then obviously they went and won that tournament. So, swings and roundabouts in it. For my additional forward alongside him, I've gone for Fernando Torres. Just love him.
I did think Nando, and then I just thought it's just because that level that he hit, it was so short-lived because he got hurt.
Yeah.
But what a player. Like, his peak was definitely higher than Butragueño's peak, but he just, because of the injuries, didn't sustain it. But Jesus wept, what a player.
They were actually very, very, very similar in strike rates as well across both of their international career, like within about 0.02 of a goal or something like that per game.
And I mean, David Silva was one of the 2 that I really struggled with. Actually, there was 3 that I really struggled with leaving out. One was Silva, one was Puyol, and the other one was Juan Carlos Valeron, who wasn't as good for the national team, but I don't know that there's ever been a Spanish player that I've just enjoyed watching because he just played the game at a pace that was different to everybody else, and not in a thing where, you know, like you watch someone like a Nico Williams and you're like, Jesus wept, this boy's got a rocket lodged to his back. Juan Carlos Valderrama played the game at walking pace and was just magnificent. So those three were the three I had a tough time leaving out.
My version of him would have been Gaisca Mendieta.
Yeah, and there's another one. Like, he was unbelievable in that Valencia team. And he was great for a legend when he went there. Yeah, like he was brilliant for Bari. It didn't work for him at Lazio. For whatever reason, it should have been a great fit. I think it was because Lazio were in turmoil. Their financial troubles had sort of bubbled to the surface. And the whole club was a mess. And obviously Sven had left and taken the England job. But Mendieta was so much fun. You know, when you're young and you're sort of looking at players and you think, geez, I'd love Liverpool to get him. And we were never going to get him because we didn't have the money to get him in the early 2000s. But I was genuinely devastated when we didn't buy him and he went to Lazio. Guy, what's your attack?
Without changing tabs, because I'm trying to find Dutch players I know. I've got David Silva on the right wing. So I'm just playing loads of midfielders, the Spain way. Iniesta left wing and David Villa up front. Again, he was kind of, because we were linked to every Spanish player in existence under Rafa, we kind of all, well, I know you follow football a lot more close than I do, but we all kind of knew him before he exploded for Spain. And then he just went on to Barcelona and different heights. And I was going to pick Torres, but he's a snake, so no.
It's fair.
Who did you get? Sorry, mine cut out just when you said the name.
Silva, Villa and Iniesta.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I was tempted to pick no striker because, you know, Spain.
It's the right thing to do.
They did famously win an international tournament, just ignoring the idea and concept of a striker with Cesc playing as a false nine. But no, I had to go with Butragueño. Okay, on to France then. I've gone for Fabian Barthez in goal. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but I always liked him. The short sleeves, the baldy head, the fact that he was small for a goalkeeper, could claw things out of the top corner, and obviously part of that incredible World Cup and European Championship teams. And also because a friend of mine, so in Ireland, when you make your confirmation, you obviously have to take a name. You know, it's generally a saint's name as like an additional part of your name. So like normal people take like, you know, Joseph or John or Robert. I took Robert after Robbie Fowler. A friend of mine, who's a girl, by the way, took Fabian after Barthez, and much to the chagrin of the parish priest. So yeah, in honour of Sarah, Fabian Barthez is in.
That sounds fair. There's always got to be a reason, I guess. I don't like any of the France goalkeepers, so I'm tempted to go for Bryce Samba, just as a tribute to all the people who make a career out of football when they shouldn't.
I can see the case. I mean, there is a real argument that Mike Maignan is the best goalkeeper they've ever had.
I think he is, but he's not my favourite. You know, I couldn't ever list him in a favourite one, even though he is very, very good. I think I'd probably go for Joel Bats. Like, we're stretching the limits of what's very, very good, but 86 World Cup, decent, famously saving in the penalty shootout. But again, I'm not looking at him and saying he's absolutely elite, but probably I'd pick him out of all the options there. I mean, there's a lot of names who along the way have been like good in their time. Like Ulrich Rame was really good in his time. Gregory Coupé when he was at Lyon for a while. Barthez, you've already mentioned. Lloris was there for about 500 years. I just never liked him. So I'd probably go Joel Bats.
No, me neither.
I
who have you got in goal?
I nearly picked Lloris just by default. But then I remembered Steve Mandanda's been in every Ultimate Team pack I've ever had. So I'm picking Steve Mandanda.
There you go.
I love the pick of Steve Mandanda, to be honest. Is he still playing?
Yeah.
He is?
Yeah. I
thought he was going to retire in the summer. He is at Rennes, yeah. He's the captain. But I thought he was to retire in the summer. No, he has signed a new deal. Magnificent. It will never not amuse me that, like, that guy played for Le Havre, went to Marseille, is a legend at Marseille. Like, he was there 9 years, played well over 300 games. And then at 31, he went to Crystal Palace, who decided he wasn't good enough. He played 10 times, and they binned him off after a year.
Didn't even get the chance to do it.
Now, they got money for it.
At Stoke.
No. Tremendous. Like, he was, to be fair to him, a very, very good goalkeeper. Deserved more than the 35 caps he got in a 14-year international career. But Lloris was captain for so much of that, and I assume Deschamps was just scared to upset the apple cart, so he didn't even play him all that often in friendlies. Right, defence then. I've just gone for the 98 defence. I've got Lilian Thuram at right back, who for me is the top 3 right back of all time. I've gone for Marcel Desailly, I've gone for Laurent Blanc, and I've gone for Bizante Lizarazu. I just think that defence was brilliantly balanced. They were so good together. That partnership of Desailly and Blanc worked. I'm not going to break it up. I'm just going to stick with it and go with that back four.
That is my same back four.
Mine isn't. I've got
guys like Bizante, who?
He's a good card on FIFA. I've got Thuram because, well, we played them in 05. I've got Desailly because, again, Chelsea days. He was kind of a mythical figure. And then I've got Ibu because I really like Ibu. And he plays for Liverpool, so it's easy to like him. And at left back, I've got Umtiti, who sacrificed his career to win France the World Cup. And he scored a worldie at left back against Tottenham in the Europa League.
And you know, like, both myself and Karl, when he, pre-injury, Umtiti, we were both pretty big fans.
Yeah.
It's such a shame. He was incredibly good. And then his body just started to fail him. And I kind of admire the fact that he has, like, I'm almost certain he's been told to retire a couple of times, and he just refuses. And he's still only 30 years of age, which is the maddest part of it all. But, like, by 2024, he was basically broken. And it doesn't bother him. He doesn't faze him. He just keeps chugging along. He's at Lille now. He barely played this past season, but he just keeps turning up and trying to make his career carry on. Loved him at Lecce, by the way. Thought he was actually really good there. It's a shame he left. He had a really good season there. But yeah, I mean, no issue have with him, Titi. He was a brilliant player, and he was phenomenal in that World Cup.
Your midfield?
Midfield then. Right, so this is where I have split generations. I have from the 1984 Le Cara Magique, the Magic Box midfield, which up until the Spain box midfield was probably the best international midfield that the game had seen. I've got Luis Fernandez at the base of it as your holding midfielder who could also spray passes everywhere. And I've got Michel Platini at the tip of it as your goal-scoring number 10. And then in the engine room of a diamond midfield, I've put Patrick Vieira, who's one of the best midfielders that I've ever seen, whose career I actually saw start to finish. And I've got N'Golo Kante, who, like, he's not playing football today. I guarantee he's running somewhere. And there's some kids in a playground just happily playing with their football with no idea that N'Golo Kante is about to come and take that ball off them. He'll give it back because he's a really nice guy, but he's going to take that ball off them. Because nobody has ever successfully dribbled a football in a country where N'Golo Kante is and completed that dribble. So I've got Fernandez, Vieira, Kante and Platini as my midfield four.
Okay. Kante, Platini. Okay, so you've got diamond, you said, right, fine. I have got a 4-man midfield. No, I've got a 3-man midfield. for France. It's a little bit more reductive in part because I have the best of them also in there, and Zidane obviously, and I got Deschamps and Makelele as doing the winning and the giving for him.
I have
the water carriers.
Yeah, I have Kante, Zidane, and Vieira. Kante is probably the best modern midfielder of his type doing that role. He's just so mad how he came out of nowhere, and now he's just everyone's second favourite player. It's just fantastic. Vieira, that Arsenal side, the invincible side, was such a big part of me growing up, and you'll probably see that in a lot of these teams. And Zidane headbutted someone in a World Cup final, and that's magical.
There's definitely warrant of inclusion.
It is magical.
Vieira over Makelele, to be fair, but I want Makelele in.
Right. In attack, then, I've gone for the two best French players I've ever seen. I've got Zidane and I've got Henry. Zidane can just wander around, create genius, and then headbutt anybody he wants to headbutt. And Thierry Henry can continue to be the player that people pretend Kylian Mbappe is. So I've got those two up front.
I really want David Trezeguet in my team, but I couldn't get him in the end. Just forward that I really liked watching. So in the end, I've got Ribéry on one side, Henry on the other, and my centre forward is Jean-Pierre Papin.
I love the Papin pick. I do. I love it. Frank Ribéry was the toughest one to leave out for me, but there was no midfielder I was prepared to lose. So yeah, unfortunately for Frank, he misses out. Guy, what's your attack?
Henry, Mbappe, and I've just swapped Ribéry in for Perez because, well, Ribéry was, again, mythical player over in Bayern Munich, so I put him in.
And Frank Ribéry, like N'Golo Kante, is currently walking towards a playground full of teenagers who are going to enjoy their day until he turns up, takes their ball off them, and then dribbles past all of them 11 times and leaves them with twisted blood, because that's just what Frank Ribéry does in his spare time. Moving on then, semi-final number 2. Let's start with England. Karl, I'm going to go to you first. We'll change up the order. So, Mr. Matchett, if you'd like to go first. Goalkeeper.
Jordan Pickford. Not really. Don't worry. Don't panic. Goalkeeper's a bit of a difficult one because I don't think the best England goalkeepers have actually been the number one England goalkeepers for most of the time. If we go back to sort of the goalkeeper glove share between Shilton and Clements, obviously for a very long time. Sort of from the end of Shilton onwards, which is the period that I'm looking at, he probably wasn't the best goalkeeper when he was still playing, sort of going into what would have been Italian 90 sort of time. After him, I always liked Nigel Martyn a lot more than David Seaman. After them, I always liked David James more than Ian Walker. I liked Paul Robinson a lot more than the 3 or 4 goalkeepers who were in there at that time. And then there was the whole weird kind of Rob Green, Scott Carson, we'll change it around every third game kind of period where none of them were really any good, if we're being honest. Chris Kirkland, I think he got 1 cap in the end. He was like tipped as the one, but injuries decimated him. And obviously now we've had Pickford for a long time, who I do think is probably the right pick, but isn't great. So my favourite out of all of them is Nigel Martyn, but he was never really England's goalkeeper much. So him and Tim Flowers were the picks.
No, I'm allowing the pick, though. He has been capped.
Yeah. I think
he has been capped, so I think it's fair.
Yeah, that's fine. Then I'll stick with Nigel Martyn and Tim Flowers is on the bench.
See, this is the thing for me. I fully agree with you with what you've said. See, I would go Clements over Shilton, and then late era Shilton, post Clements. I would say Chris Wood was the best England goalkeeper. And then we move into the David Seaman era, and I thought Flowers in the early part of that and Martin in the late part of that were both better than him. And then, like you said, from there, from Seaman to Joe Hart is a very odd period of time, because there was some very talented goalkeepers, and you listed a bunch of them, but they all would either get injured or they'd turn up for international duty, and it was like they'd completely forgotten what they were there to do. And like Paul Robinson was one. Like, he was a good goalkeeper, a really good goalkeeper at club level, but he never really performed well for England. David James, on the other hand, might have actually been better for England than he was for Liverpool. But yeah, it's always been a weird thing with the England goalkeeper. Like, I would say over the last 5 years, Nick Pope has been a better goalkeeper than Jordan Pickford. But Pickford probably is a better choice for the international team because he plays that little bit higher. He's better with his feet. Not great with his feet, but he's better with his feet. And I think his personality helps a bit more because he's quite vocal, and England don't really have, until Mark Guehi's come along now, they didn't really have anybody in that defence that could really organise. Like Kyle Walker, brainless footballer. Luke Shaw, brainless footballer. John Stones is a follower, not a leader. And Maguire, I think, can be a leader, but at the same time, a lot of games appear too big for Harry Maguire, and he needs someone constantly on him to keep him focused. That's why we see at United, he makes so many mistakes, because he's not focused. Whereas with England, I think Pickford's constant yapping did keep Maguire a bit more focused in the game, which is why we saw more solid, but part of why we saw more solid performances for England. But I don't disagree with Pickford being in. I just don't think he's England's best goalkeeper. But yeah, I think Nigel Martin's a great pick. Guy, who have you got?
He's got great posture. He can't save anything to his left after the year 2014. I've got Joe Hart, and he's got awful tattoos, but I picked him.
Joe Hart, Celtic legend Joe Hart, if nobody minds. I've gone for Ray Clements. I think he's the best goalkeeper England have ever produced. And he's obviously, well, now probably the second best goalkeeper that Liverpool ever had, because the current fella is a little bit special. Karl, what's your your defence, whether it's back three or back four?
Well, it's England, so it's very, very much back four. Right back is a really tricky one, I think. I'll come back to that in a minute. Ashley Cole left back, and Tony Adams and Sol Campbell as centre backs. So they're a little bit same periody, but I think England have probably had a lot of strength in the centre over the years. They've always had someone who's very nearly standout or elite or at the very top of the game. It's just that they haven't always necessarily overlapped as a pairing, perhaps. Like Tony Adams' era was obviously very, very strong defensively. Then you had Keogh and you had Southgate. Ferdinand was obviously really good for a period, but I liked Sol Campbell more. I just thought as an England defender, he was the better one. I still haven't decided my right back. I'm still between about four names, so you go ahead.
Hey, Guy, what's your back four?
I've got Ashley Cole. I think that's an easy one for my generation. Harry Maguire, just for that penalty against Italy. Sensational.
That's fair. It's the best penalty I've ever seen.
Oh, there's never getting top. Everyone was like, he's missing, and it's, oh dear me. Ledley King, who is, again, a mythical figure, turned up for about 3 games, was the best centre-back in the league whilst I was growing up, and then you've just never seen him for 4 months. But I like that. I like the mystique. And Trent, I don't care that he probably got about a third of the caps he should do and a lot less minutes. The fact they've not built round him is disgusting.
I agree. I've got Trent at right back. I think he's the best right back. I mean, there are definite cases for others based on what they've done for England. Like Viv Anderson, for example, absolutely a legitimate shout. Paul Parker, I think, was tremendous for England, and he was great for United as well in those early years of winning the Premier League. But I'd go Trent. I've got the same centre-backs as Karl. I've got Tony Adams and Sol Campbell, but I did strongly consider Ledley King to go with Campbell. Because Ledley King is of those centre-backs of that era, which would be King, Woodgate, Terry, Ferdinand, and Carragher, I think Ledley King is head and shoulders above the rest of them. But the guy just had the worst set of knees since Paul McGrath. And Tony Adams was incredibly good. Like in the late 80s and early 90s, he was phenomenal. And then as he aged, he went from being sort of, he was a better version of John Terry at his peak. But in his later career, because he was playing next to Keown, and because you had Arsene Wenger as manager insisting on playing out from the back, Tony Adams unlocked this previously unseen ball-playing aspect to his game and could ping passes with both feet, and every so often would get really excited and go carrying the ball through midfield. And nobody knew what to do because at the time, you just didn't see this happen in English football. Like, people had done it on the continent for 25 years, Beckenbauer most famously. Nobody had seen an English centre-back get the ball and just have a look and go, all right, I'm going to carry it 30 yards here and let's see what happens. And everybody would be terrified to go and try and tackle him because you'd be leaving your man. So, yeah, Tony Adams reinventing himself, massively impressive. I've got Ashley Cole at left back, obviously. I mean, I don't think there's any debate there. Ashley Cole is probably a top 5 or 6 left back in the history of the game. Phenomenal 1v1 defender. Karl, you can leave your right back if you want, or you can throw it in now, but give us your midfield as well.
Okay, so my right backs I was between was obviously Trent, Stevens, Lee Dixon, who was the long-term one, and Gary Neville. Personally, I think Rob Jones is better than all of them, but for this conversation, not long enough, not good enough for long enough. Not going to go in my team. So I will go Trent. Why not? Because he is the best one. So who cares about the rest of them? And especially Gary Stevens, because he was Everton. So there you go. Get out. Midfield-wise, I've gone for a mix which would not work in a game.
This was hard.
Yeah, really, really difficult. I've gone for a mix which would not work in a game, but players who I liked a lot, like to see playing, and who, for the most part, I think did big things for England as well. So I'm not winning the game, but I'll be fun to watch. So I've got Beckham on the right, Steven Gerrard and Paul Gascoigne in the centre, and John Barnes on the left.
I like all the picks individually.
Yeah.
Like, I really do. I think it's a funny thing with Beckham, where I do think during his career, I think he was slightly overrated. And now I think it's come all the way around, and I think he's become massively underrated. I think people just look at him and go, oh yeah, he was a good crosser and he could take a set piece. But they miss the fact he was also a ridiculous passer of the ball. He worked like a dog, and he is the primary reason Gary Neville had such a career, because he gave him so much help defensively. He was a complete all-rounder, and he scored. Like, his goal catalogue is probably second only to Matt Letizia in terms of English players, because he rarely scored anything that wasn't a worldie. And then, like, Gerrard, Gaza, and Barnes are all incredible footballers. So, yeah, you're not winning a game with that midfield, but I do love the individuals.
We may win a few, like 3-2 with just some worldies, and they didn't get the ball this game.
Yeah, that's fair. Guy, what have you got?
Gerrard, just default pick. I think he underperformed for England, but I think he was the best of an underperforming England side for probably a decade. Or certainly when I was watching. I've picked Michael Carrick, who I just don't know how he didn't get many England caps. He seemed like the perfect midfielder to fix the issue. And I originally had Lampard, but then I remember he played for Chelsea, and yeah, I don't do that. I know Ashley Cole, but he's there by default. So I picked Jordan Henderson. I know you don't like him, but I think 13-14 till 18-19, I thought he was really good, or really useful at the bare minimum. But yeah, I just picked them three, and I think that'd kind of work in real life as well.
I was going to pretend I didn't hear any of that.
Yeah.
I've got Michael Carrick as well. Michael Carrick was He's the most underrated English midfielder of all time. He's just incredible. So I've got him sitting at the base of a diamond. I've got Gerrard at the tip of the diamond because number 10, Steven Gerrard, is something that we needed more of. And then in my midfield, I've gone Gaza because I don't think you can. You wouldn't have seen Gaza, guy, because obviously you were only born in the late 90s or the mid-late 90s. But like, especially pre-injury, Gaza was just like ridiculous. Is the only word you can think of to say for him. He was just insanely good. And I've gone Brian Robson because I think he gets forgotten about too much, but he carried England in the 80s from the midfield. He was monstrous. And if not for injuries, and you go and look at the injuries he suffered, international tournament after international tournament, he got hurt either just before or in the first game. And it absolutely blew England's chances of doing anything at the tournament. So he was an incredible footballer, along with Gerrard, probably the best all-round midfielder that England produced. And then you've got Carrick to just be defensive and run the game, and Gaza, because you have to have Gaza. Karl, what's your attack?
Shearer and Lineker. Pretty routine for me, I think.
Fair.
Fowler, but ultimately I used to love watching Lineker when I was really, really young, when he was an England player. Lots of mystique about him, overseas, and then he disappeared to Japan, which I didn't even know had football at the time. Obviously, I was quite young. And Shearer was just the or wasn't he? Like, ridiculous. No, need to get him out. Could have had another 8 people, because we've spoken about loads of them, like Les Ferdinand. Used to love watching him play, brilliant. All the rest of it, Fowler, blah, blah, blah. But these two, I think, are clear for me.
And Guy?
I nearly put Joe Cole in it, but then I remembered his time at Liverpool. So I've gone Saka, Kane and Rooney.
I'm not going to lie, I just threw up a little bit in my mouth.
Yeah. I don't like it.
If you had put Joe Cole in, I would be contacting Eddie to insist that we brought in mandatory drug testing for all staff members, because Jesus wept. But I don't mind the 3 you picked at all. I mean, I think it's a little aggressive to put Saka in at this point, but he's obviously an incredibly good player. And Rooney, to me, Rooney was a hard one, because I think Rooney peaked for England in 2004 when he was 18, and I don't think he was ever quite as good despite the goal scoring record. But Rooney was a phenomenal player. I've always felt like he didn't quite live up to the level that was expected of him when he was 16, 17, in part because he played far too much too early in his career. And then he just didn't look after himself either. So, well, yeah, I mean, a hell of a player. I've gone Shearer for the same reasons as Karl, just goals. The guy, in the 90s, there was no point in even discussing who would win the Golden Boot in the 90s until Owen appeared, because it just seemed like it would be Shearer every year unless he got hurt. He was just an absolute machine. And then I've gone Kevin Keegan, because I think he's the best English player of all time. I actually think Kevin Keegan's the best English player of all time. So I've gone for him.
Fair enough. He's a little...
let's move on. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, he's 70s, like, but I mean, 2-time European Footballer of the Year, won the European Cup with Liverpool, went to Hamburg, who'd done absolutely nothing of note, and won a league title and turned them into a tremendous team. I think Kevin Keegan was incredible for us, for them, he was at Southampton playing in a mid-table team, and he won the Footballer of the Year. I just think he was incredible, and he was great for England, so I've gone with him. This next team, though, the Dutch, this is my favourite one that I managed to put together. I love this team. So, Karl, do you want to kick us off then with your goalkeeper?
Edwin van der Sar.
And Guy?
Same for me.
Yeah, and I've got Edwin van der Sar as well. Phenomenal. Right, Karl, back 4. or back three if you want.
It is a back four. So I had to make one alteration here from my only sort of mid-80s onwards, just because I have had the opportunity to watch this guy back, and he only finished slightly earlier than that. He was still playing into the 80s. Ruud Krol, I just think has to be in the team somewhere. He's just too good to not be, and he was so important for Dutch football for absolutely ages. So I've got him at right back. I've got Van Dijk and Jaap Stam in the centre, and at left back, backwards and forwards about 16 times, but I'll go with Frank de Boer.
I do enjoy that back four. Guy, what have you got?
I need help with my back four, because I barely saw Stam. I know I'd barely seen Thuram and stuff like that either. But I can't think of a Dutch right back, and I need another centre back next to Van Dijk, and I put Van Bronckhorst in because he scored that worldie.
So the Dutch had,
I love Van Bronckhorst.
Quite significant issues at left back, which is why Van Bronckhorst ended up there. For a while, it was supposed to be Wilfred Boomer was going to be the one for them, but he never quite had probably the defensive tenacity they wanted. He was probably better going forward. And they had Reitziger on the right for so long and De Boer on the left for so long, but they never really brought through anybody else to challenge them. That Dutch back line for ages just didn't change, and so nobody really challenged them. I think Winston Bohada was maybe the only other one who got a bit of a run on the left for quite a while, but Koeman had to.
When De Boer moved centrally, yeah.
Koeman had to play for ages. Then De Boer had to play, so he went in the middle, and that was. There wasn't really a massive turnover, especially at fullback. John Heitinga, I know you might remember him from Everton, and he was a bit of a kicker and a plodder. But when he came through at Ajax, he was a right back, and he was an attacking right back, and he was a brilliant attacking right back.
Yeah.
He was technically brilliant.
No, Ron Vlaar is.
Yeah, he was when Heitinga came through, that was with that generation of Wes Schneider and Arjen Robben and Van Persie and Huntelaar and Van der Vaart's a little bit older than them, but they all appeared on the Dutch scene around the same time. And it was sort of right, well, that's 5-6 starters. We can just, he's at right back. There's no question about it. Van der Vaart and Schneider will be in midfield. There's no question there. Van Persie and Huntelaar will be up front. Arjen Robben will be on a wing. So we only really need, maybe another winger, or maybe we just play Schneider or Van der Vaart wide. We put another one in midfield for a bit of defensive force. And then centre-backs. And it's Holland. They always produce centre-backs. And Van der Sar is obviously predates them, but he was still a really good goalkeeper. I know he was towards the end of his career, but he was still really good. And you just thought these are going to be phenomenal. The Dutch always produce a good centre back. Might not have two, but if they have one great one and one good one or one decent one, they'll be fine. And then in the end, Johnny Heitinga and Andy van der Meyde was another part of that actually.
Oh, yeah.
But they just he never developed. And like you said, Karl, he went from being this highly technical, almost Javier Zanetti type of right back, into just being this absolute hacker who just boot people up in the air. And that was even before he got to Everton, he started doing it. That was really, really strange.
Yeah. They did have a couple of other really young ones who they tried to bring through at the time, like Hedwigs Maduro, and it never really quite happened for him. And
Gregory Van der Veel.
Van der Veel, God, yeah. But
was legend.
ESG, you signed him for an absolute fortune.
Yeah.
Loads and loads of them around that time.
He just disappeared.
Yeah, and just fell off the radar totally.
So I'm going to put Dirk Kuyt right back and Ron Vlaar at centre back.
you got Cali Boularus as well.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
The cannibal. He's fucking terrible when he came to England. I have gone. So I've got Ruud Krul and Wim Suurbier as my fullbacks. Suurbier's hugely underrated, played in both World Cup finals for them, 74, 78. was a key part of that Ajax team that won 3 European Cups in a row. Ruud Krul is one of the best Dutch players of all time and gets in the team in whatever position he wants to play. Could play anywhere across the back line or in midfield. I'm going to stick him at left back because I want Serbia at right back. I've got Jaap Stam and Van Dijk as centre backs. They're the two most dominant centre backs I've seen. They're just physical freaks. Virgil's the better of the two because he's also incredibly good on the ball. But two monstrous fellas who are 6'3", 6'4", and yet could outsprint pretty much anybody and outmuscle anybody they wanted. Just more manly than everybody else.
Too much.
Yeah, so that's my back four. Serbia, Stam, Van Dijk and Krul.
I don't know about you, but I thought the Dutch midfield was the hardest unit to put together out of this whole thing.
I agree. I had to leave out some incredible players. I had to leave out incredible wingers. From the attack, the defense was tough to do from the point of finding four that you were really happy with having. Like, obviously, we've just seen Guy having put Ron Vlaar in. So, like, that was tough. But it was, in midfield and attack, it was like, I can't believe I have to leave out this player.
Yeah.
So what have you got in midfield for us?
I think I've left out more that I wanted than I've actually got in the end. So I'm going effectively 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1. So I've got Schneider right side, who I had to get him in. I loved him. I thought he's just such a good player to watch. Really, really aggressive for an attacking midfielder as well, which I love. And then I've got him for two players in midfield who you will never win a duel with. I've got Edgar Davids, who I thought was one of the most exciting players I'd ever seen when he was in his prime, and Frank Rijkaard. And then on the left, pure width and pace, Mark Overmars.
Overmars, to me, was one that was really hard to leave out. I loved Mark Overmars. 2-footed, lightning quick, nothing flashy about his game.
Yeah,
like wasn't doing a million step overs, was just dropping a shoulder and then leaving you for dead. Phenomenal player, absolutely phenomenal. There's very few things in football that have the hardest one of all though to leave out was actually Davids.
Oh God,
that's the hardest one that I had to leave out.
I could not leave Edgar Davids
because there's very few sights in football that have been more fun than Edgar Davids absolutely smashing somebody with a challenge, getting up, taking control of the ball, and then Cruyff turning past two defenders and dribbling away from them at high speed. Just like, imagine N'Golo Kante with like elite level technical ability, and that's pretty much Edgar Davids, but I had to leave him out because there was somebody I had to get in ahead of him. I love your midfield, though. I genuinely love your midfield. Guy, what have you got in midfield for us?
I have Clarence Seedorf, Edgar Davids, because he was on the cover of FIFA 2003 and he wore goggles, and Nigel de Jong drop-kicked someone in a World Cup final and got away with it. So, yeah, I'm picking him.
Can't argue with the reasoning, at least.
I do have a soft spot.
Goggles, video game, and drop kicks.
I do have a real soft spot for Nigel de Jong. Right, I have gone, once again, for four-man midfield. I've got a diamond again for the third. I've got 3 diamonds in a box midfield, which might tell you how I enjoy my football. I've got Frank Rijkaard at the base of it. He's a top 3 defensive midfielder of all time. And he was a great centre-back. A freak athlete, incredibly intelligent, technically off the charts, phenomenal. I've gone Clarence Seedorf because I loved his whole career, from Ajax to Sampdoria to Real to Inter to AC, and it just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous on a football field. And then this is where I had to leave out Davids because I went with Johan Neeskens. because if you go back and look at that Dutch team in the 70s, there's three players that everybody talks about. One is Ruud Krul, one is Johan Cruyff, and the other is Johan Neeskens. And as an all-round midfielder who could just do everything, like, he was the Gerrard of his day. Maybe not as physically powerful as Gerrard, but probably a higher technical level, which is an incredible thing to say given what Gerrard was. Johan Neeskens was phenomenal. And then I went with Ruud Gullit as my number 10 because it's Ruud Gullit, and he was, when I was growing up, Maradona was the best player in the world and Ruud Gullit was the second best player in the world. And he was just like, there's a clip of him. Like, you want to talk about athletes to play the game. He picks the ball up in his own half. He is 20 yards from the nearest defender, running towards the halfway line. The defences come up to meet him, and he just boots it past them. They have a huge head start. One of them has turned to get a head start on him, and without seeming to change speed, he just breezes past them all. Just a freak athlete, incredible technical level. I think another huge human being, like 6'3", 6'4". Like, imagine Didier Drogba with Jude Bellingham's skill set in midfield. That's basically what, and more athleticism. Jude Bellingham is actually the closest thing we've seen to Ruud Gullit since, and he's not a patch on Ruud Gullit. Yeah, so I've got Rijkaard, Seedorf, Neeskens, and Ruud Gullit, and I do apologise to Edgar Davids. It was really hard to leave you out, but I had to go Neeskens.
Neeskens, I think, is a must-have if I was going earlier, but it would not have been at the expense of Gullit. He would be probably first on my list for the Dutch.
What are the attacks then, Mr. Matchett? Who have you got?
Well, I don't need to explain why, because you've just given us a lovely monologue of every trait he has, and Ruud Gullit is my number 10 behind the striker. For obvious reasons, my striker is Marco van Basten.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, top 2, top 3, number 9 of all time. Him or 9. And then I think Suarez is in that mix, but Jesus. For what he went 3 Ballon d'Ors in a row. Phenomenal. Guy, who have you got in attack?
Ian Robben, Van Persie, and Bergkamp.
Yeah, pretty solid, that, to be fair. That's getting goals.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's getting you a ton of goals. I've got Van Basten for obvious reasons. And then I went with Johan Cruyff because it's Johan Cruyff. And Dennis Bergkamp was the one that misses out there because, yeah, it just had to be Cruyff for me. But Dennis Bergkamp would be in otherwise. So I've got 3 big misses. Davids, Overmars, and Bergkamp. Those 3 I adored watching every minute that they played. They were just phenomenal.
Well, you never get an Overmars in your team if you only play with diamonds and box players. So there you go. You can't have him.
This is the thing. Yeah, the system ruled him out, and then unfortunately, if I'd gone 80s onwards, Neeskens and Cruyff would not have been in. Davids and Bergkamp would, but I went 70s onwards. So, yeah, I'm happy though. I love this team. I would put that team up against any team in the world right now, club or country, and they would fucking wipe the floor with them. So when people tell you football is better now than it used to be, they're lying to you. Right, we've gone long. Is there anything anybody wants to touch on before we go?
I'm sorry we didn't mention Wim Jonk and about 40 other Dutch players at any point.
Yeah. We missed a lot of great players.
We'll do another one on the Dutch another time.
Like I said, send us your teams. Right, we will be back tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.